Good afternoon to you on this 19th day of Level 4 lockdown in South Africa. My name is Mark Long, rector of the parish of St Andrews in Newlands. Today's Eucharist readings again come from the book of Acts and the Gospel of John. In John's Gospel, Jesus is speaking about the gift of the Spirit, this advocate that will be given to humankind. The advocate who will come and persuade us or help us understand the nature of the love of God, visible in Jesus' ministry, in his death, resurrection, and ascension. Love that really is without definition in so many ways. As part of this reading, Jesus says that the Spirit will come and convict the world about sin, righteousness, and judgment. The words used, I think, will prove the world wrong. And it struck me that those three words, sin, righteousness, judgment, we all have images that we carry about what they are. And I think sometimes the images we carry are not necessarily what Jesus is talking about, certainly in the context of John 16 here. Sin, a dictionary definition, is that it's an immoral act that in some form transgresses divine law. When Jesus talks about sin, it's often, and in this context of John 16, it's in the context of a lack of belief. Jesus says, you haven't believed in me. And I think it's important that we interrogate that a little as to what Jesus' expectation was of those words. What does it, from Jesus' perspective, what does it mean to believe in him? I'm always struck by that phrase that certainly in my Pentecostal youth we used quite a lot was, if you were talking to somebody about their faith or lack of it, well, the question would be, are you saved? And a lovely story of that being up on a notice at some point and somebody writing underneath, from what? What do we mean when we speak of sin? What do we mean when we speak of belief? What do we mean when we speak of salvation? Jesus certainly challenged people in his own time to think differently. It's very easy to get caught up in quite concretized understandings of these terms and ultimately of what relationship with God looks like. For many in Jesus' time, it was a sort of legalistic keeping of the law, of the teachings of the faith, to the point where actually God would often be pushed out of the experience. Jesus, when he's asked what really is important about the law, points to two passages, one saying that it is to love God with all that we have, and that it's to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. In my sermon on Sunday, I suggested that perhaps it's to love our neighbor as we ourselves are loved by God, and to really share that. And so sin, from the perspective that Jesus uses it in today's gospel, is where we refuse to acknowledge what God is up to in our world. And for people in Jesus' time, it was a refusal to acknowledge that he came from God, that he spoke words that God had given him to speak, that he came to represent the divine creator within creation and call us as human beings to embrace that relationship in a new and life-giving way. And so sin would be to not acknowledge that. Sin would be to continue to walk our own way. Sin would be, and this is the complication when Jesus speaks of the world, he seems to be speaking very often to fellow Jews rather than the wider world as you and I would define it today. And really challenging those who considered themselves to be people of faith, in terms of the way they actually interpreted the call of God upon their lives, the manner in which they interpreted the teachings of the faith in such ways that actually there was no room for the Spirit, once the Spirit arrived, to really flow in our lives and in our communities. And so I think a challenge for me today, personally, but hopefully for you as well, for us to think about these words. I focused a bit on sin, and there's a whole lot more we could say about that. But what do we hear when we speak of judgment and when we speak of other things within the context of faith? Critical is, are we hearing God and are we responding to what God is saying and asking of us?